Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Today we're going to discuss how great leaders inspire action, a TED Talk inspired by Simon Sinek. My name is Ethan Mooney. First and foremost, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the history of TED before we dive into this. TED began in 1984 as an ultimate dinner party. Hosted by architect Richard Saul Wurman, the original vision was to create an anti-conference where speeches were not scripted or prepared, and there were not boring lectures or PowerPoint presentations that dragged on, sort of like this one may seem. Instead, people took the stage to talk about subjects or things that fascinated them. And despite the acclaimed speakers who were gathered in the first year, the first conference was not financially successful. 6 years later, in 1990, Wurman tried recreating the TED Conference, and it really took off. In addition to the name change, he created the 18-minute format, which is supposedly the limit of the human attention span, as well as making the event an invitation-only gathering. These changes made it one of the most sought-after tickets of the year. In 2001, Wurman began to get tired of running these conferences, though, and sold the rights of TED to the Sapling Foundation in 2001. Chris Anderson, maintaining the vision of the conference, brought together world-changing ideas in these short, 18-minute videos. TED soon grew to incorporate TED Global and became a series of worldwide conferences. The name TED comes from the conversion of technology, entertainment, and design, and has changed to include just about every topic today, including science and business. TED is now a nonprofit who is devoted in spreading ideas with communities and people around the world. A little bit about Simon Sinek. Simon was viewed by many as a visionary thinker who often encourages others to challenge the status quo. He uses his abilities in positive ways to inspire others through his words and actions. He studies people and culture to explore society from all different perspectives. Sinek is a British-American author and motivational speaker who was born in London. He graduated with degrees in laws and cultural anthropology from the London City University and Brandeis University, respectively. He has written a total of 5 books, of which several have appeared on the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times bestsellers lists. Sinek is known for his optimism, bright view of our ability to work together, and in building a bright future. This TED was released in 2009 and has risen to one of the 3rd most watched TED Talks of all time. Sinek is known well in the business industry for he has worked with American Airlines, Disney, and Mars to change the way their business leaders think. He also worked for the RAND Corporation, which is regarded as one of the biggest think tanks in the world. As we begin to discuss this TED Talk, I think it's important to give a brief description. Apple was never the only computer company. Although they may at times been more innovative than their competitors, innovation wasn't what set them apart. They have the exact same access to people and resources as every one of their competitors. Martin Luther King was not the only man who suffered in a pre-rights America, and he certainly wasn't the only great orator of his time, yet he led the civil rights movement when others were just as capable, but he stood out. The Wright brothers are known for winning the race for controlled powered manned flight, but it wasn't because they were better, or because they had a more qualified team or better funding. In fact, they had none of these factors, yet they were still able to succeed. The question we are asked is what makes each of these groups the leaders of their organizations or movements? Why do they stand out opposed to their competitors? Sinek goes into a depth and further discussion on how he found a pattern to their success. And he found that all of them think, act, and communicate the same way. And it's nothing like what we do. Simon discusses how these ideas and patterns change the way that he views and acts in the world. He determined that these ideas follow a common theme, a simple idea that he titled the Golden Circle, and more specifically, the why, the how, and the what. This idea also helps explain why some people and organizations have the ability to inspire while others aren't as able. Everyone knows what, and some know how, but very few know why. Not the result, an example profit, but the purpose. Why do these people get out of bed in the morning? All of us think and communicate from the outside in. We go from clearer ideas to those that are fuzzier. But the inspired leaders in organizations communicate differently. They communicate from the inside out. A great example he uses is Apple. If Apple were like its competitors, they would say, "We make great computers. They are beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one?" Say there's a new law firm. They might say something like, "We have the best lawyers, the biggest clients, and we always perform well for them. Choose us," etc. Instead, Apple sells it in a different way. They tell us, "Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo, in thinking differently. The way we do it is by beautifully designing simple to use and user-friendly computers. We just happen to make them. Want to buy one?" People don't buy what you do. People buy why you do it. For this reason, we do not see a problem in buying a computer from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or even an MP3 player from Apple. We do business with people who believe what we believe, and that is one of the keys to Apple's success. One thing that Sinek discusses during the TED Talk, which I found extremely interesting, is how the brain functions and reacts to the many sales pitches we hear each day. The brain is divided into three main portions, just like the Golden Circle. The neocortex controls the rational, analytical decisions and language, and it portion of the brain that responds to the what. The limbic portions correspond to trust and loyalty, our feelings and decision making, but not language. It responds to the how and the why. When we communicate from the inside out, we are talking to the right part of the brain that actually drives behavior. A company's goal is not to sell to people who need what you have. Their goal is to sell to people who believe what they believe. Similarly, the goal is not just to hire people who need a job. The goal is to hire people who believe what you believe. He explained this perfectly with his Samuel Pierpont Langley example. Langley was contracted by the U.S. government and given $50,000 to figure out this flying machine. He had what some called a dream team. He had the connection to the biggest minds, people who went to the smartest universities, and he had the option to pick any of them to join him in building a team. Furthermore, he had a team who reported on him from the New York Times who was always by his side, and everybody hoping to see him succeed. But surprisingly, nobody remembers him. Instead, people remember the team of Orville and Wilbur Wright, brothers that had no money, no team that was well educated, and no reporters following them around. Why, you may ask? Well, there's a difference. Orville and Wilbur were driven by a cause, and they wanted to change the course of the world. All Samuel Langley cared about was the riches. After the Wright brothers were successful in flight, Langley quit the very next day, and instead of using the resources in the team that he had built to help them in perfecting flight, he just walked away. Orville and Wilbur were driven by a cause, and they refused to give up, no matter how many times they crashed. Their team worked toward a goal, not for the paycheck. Another thing that Simon discussed during this talk was the law of diffusion of innovation. In this, the first 2.5% are innovators, the first 13.5% early adopters, 34% cover early majority and late majority, and then the last 16 are named the laggards. If you want success, you first must achieve the tipping point, which is between 15 and 18%. 10% of people just get it. That's not enough to make you successful. In order to be successful, you must cross the chasm, as Geoffrey Moore says it. The early majority of people will not try something until someone else does it first. He also discusses how the key to success is money, the right people, and the right market conditions. But the law of diffusion of innovation has provided us with two examples. TiVo, which was a commercial failure because of what they told us they had. They told us they were able to pause live TV, skip commercials, and memorize your viewing habits. Consumers said that we didn't want that, we didn't need that, and that they were scaring us. Now, had they promoted their product by saying, if you are someone who likes to control your life, boy, do we have the product for you. It can pause live TV, skip commercials, and even memorize your viewing habits. People would have loved the product and made the company successful. But instead, the whole corporation turned out to be a failure. What you do is proof of why you believe. In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up to hear Dr. Martin Luther King speak. There were no invitations, no websites, but everybody just showed up. Some of his ideas were bad, but he didn't tell people what needed to change. He told people what he believed. Soon to follow, others made King's ideas their own motivation and inspiration. No one in the audience really showed up for Dr. King. They showed up for themselves. We followed him not for him, but for ourselves. There's a difference between leaders and those who lead. Leaders hold power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. We follow those who lead not because we have to, but because we want to. We don't follow them for them. We follow them for ourselves. Those who start with the why have the ability to inspire those around them. Today, technology poses many challenges in society, many of which our generations have worked to combat with innovation as times change, but some issues will remain for years to come. Professional development is an important issue to address for many of our kids. Communication skills have been sidelined to ensure that they know how to properly use technology. Resistance to change can also be seen as another issue. And after determining for themselves that there is no better solution, many people give up and don't make the critical changes that are sometimes necessary. These two, in addition to others, provide an unweighable threat to future generations, because the world and communication as we know it is ever changing, and it is important for us to continue to change and innovate with the times. Now, as we bring this video to conclude, I have a few questions that I'd like to ask you. First, why do you think more companies and businesses do not use Sinek's golden circle approach to marketing? After researching this video, I found a little bit more about this particular TED. And the second question is, why do you think this TED in particular stands out? What has made it cause so many others to watch it? And third, finally, which technological risk do you feel will pose the biggest threat to society, and why? Sinek mentioned many throughout his talk. Feel free to use any of the ones that he had provided. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. Enjoy the rest of your day.